Billionaire mocks black waitress's proposal. She exposes him in front of everyone. What if a black waitress's rejection of a tech billionaire's mockery exposed a web of corporate corruption and sparked a revolution? Camila Johnson moved through the dining room of Lucille, New York City's most exclusive restaurant, with the grace of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. At 29, her life was a balancing act. Her mother's hospital bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and her younger brother, Marcus, was a freshman at NYU, his tuition a constant weight on her shoulders. Every shift at Lucille was a marathon, 10 hours on her feet, serving Manhattan's elite, who barely glanced at her unless their wine was late. But Camila wasn't just a waitress. She was a dreamer, and her dream was bigger than the polished tables she served. By day, she was a server. By night, she was building something revolutionary. For months, she'd been working on a mentorship program called Rise Tech, designed to help young people from underrepresented communities break into the tech industry. She'd partnered with local leaders, drafted proposals, and poured her heart into a vision of change. But dreams like hers needed money. Big money. And in a city where wealth ruled, she knew her chance would come at Lucille, where billionaires dined. Camila was no stranger to hardship. Raised in Brooklyn by a single mother, she'd learned early that the world didn't hand out opportunities to people like her. Her mother, Diane, had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, her hands rough from cleaning houses and her spirit worn but unbroken. When Diane was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, Camila took on the role of provider. She worked doubles, picked up extra shifts, and still found time to help Marcus with his college applications. Her brother was her pride, brilliant, ambitious, the first in their family to go to college. But every tuition payment felt like a knife twisting in her gut. She was determined to give him a future, even if it meant sacrificing her own. At Lucille, Camila was a star employee. Her manager, Elena, relied on her to handle the high-pressure nights when the restaurant was packed with Wall Street tycoons and tech moguls. Her colleagues respected her work ethic, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and her knack for remembering every order, every preference. But to the customers, she was just another face in a black apron, invisible unless something went wrong. She'd learned to swallow the casual disrespect, the snapped fingers, the dismissive glances, the occasional racial slight masked as a joke. It stung, but she had bigger battles to fight. One regular stood out, Dominic Blackwell. At 45, he was a tech billionaire whose name was synonymous with power. His company, Black Tech Solutions, dominated the industry, its sleek logo plastered across billboards and startup pitches. Dominic was a paradox, a man who donated millions to charities while his business practices were whispered to be ruthless. He'd built an empire on innovation, but rumors swirled of exploited workers, shady deals, and a culture that kept diversity out of the boardroom. To the public, he was a philanthropist. To those in the know, he was a wolf in a tailored suit. Dominic dined at Lucille every Thursday, always at the same corner table, surrounded by colleagues or clients. His presence filled the room, an aura of confidence bordering on arrogance. He tipped generously but spoke to the staff like they were furniture. Camila had served his table dozens of times, memorizing his order, dry-aged ribeye, medium rare, no sides, and his habits, he never looked at the bill. She'd overheard his conversations, too, talk of acquisitions, layoffs, and disrupting industries with little regard for the human cost. It fueled her determination to make Rise Tech a reality. If men like Dominic controlled the tech world, she'd carve out a space for those he overlooked. Camila's plan was simple but audacious. She'd spent weeks refining her Rise Tech proposal, a 20-page document outlining mentorships, coding bootcamps, and scholarships for young people from marginalized communities. She'd secured support from community leaders like Reverend Carter, who ran a youth center in Brooklyn, and Maria Lopez, a former tech recruiter who believed in her vision. But without funding, Rise Tech was just a dream on paper. Camila needed an investor, someone with deep pockets and influence. Someone like Dominic Blackwell. She'd been watching him for weeks, waiting for the right moment. She'd overheard him talk about diversity initiatives at Black Tech, though his tone was always dismissive, as if it were a box to check rather than a mission to believe in. Still, she thought, maybe there was a chance. Maybe beneath the polished exterior, he'd see the value in her idea. She wasn't naive, she knew men like Dominic didn't care about people like her, but she also knew she had nothing to lose. Thursday night was busy, the restaurant buzzing with energy. Dominic's table was packed with his usual entourage. 3 men in suits and a woman in a sharp blazer, all laughing too loudly at his jokes. Camila served their drinks, her hands steady despite the knot in her stomach. Her proposal was tucked into her apron, printed on crisp paper she'd paid for at a copy shop. She'd rehearsed her pitch 100 times, practicing in front of her bathroom mirror until the words felt natural. Tonight was her shot. As she cleared their appetizers, she took a deep breath. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice clear but polite, "may I have a moment of your time?" The table fell silent. Dominic looked up, his piercing blue eyes narrowing slightly. He leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "This ought to be interesting," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. His colleagues exchanged amused glances. Camila's heart raced, but she pressed on. "My name is Camila Johnson, and I've been working on a project to help young people from underrepresented communities break into tech. It's called Rise Tech, a mentorship program that provides training, resources, and opportunities. I'd love to share the proposal with you. I think it aligns with your company's mission." She pulled the proposal from her apron and set it on the table, her hands trembling slightly. The room seemed to shrink, the clatter of dishes fading into the background. She could feel every eye on her, from the other servers to the nearby tables. Dominic didn't touch the proposal. He glanced at it, then back at her, his smirk widening. "Rise Tech," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "Let me get this straight. You're a waitress, and you think you've cracked the code to fixing the tech industry." His colleagues chuckled, their laughter sharp and cruel. Camila's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "I've done the research, sir. The program has support from community leaders, and the data shows." "Data?" Dominic interrupted, leaning forward. "Sweetheart, people like you have no idea how the world really works. You think a few coding classes will change anything? The tech industry isn't a charity case. It's a machine, and it chews up dreamers like you." The table erupted in laughter, the sound echoing through the restaurant. A few nearby diners turned to stare, their expressions a mix of pity and amusement. Camila felt the weight of their gazes, the sting of Dominic's words cutting deeper than she'd expected. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never face these people again. But something inside her refused to break. She straightened, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I believe in this program, Mr. Blackwell. And I believe there are people who'd see its value." Dominic waved a hand dismissively. "Take my advice, Camila. Stick to serving tables. Leave the big ideas to the big players." He turned to his colleagues, already moving on to the next topic, as if she were nothing more than a fleeting annoyance. Camila walked away, her hands shaking as she clutched her tray. The humiliation was suffocating, but beneath it, a fire was growing. She wasn't done yet. Back in the kitchen, Camila leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. Elena, her manager, noticed her distress and pulled her aside. "What happened out there?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Camila shook her head, unable to speak. The words "people like you" echoed in her mind, each syllable a reminder of every door slammed in her face, every opportunity denied. But then she remembered the recorder in her apron pocket. For months, she'd been recording snippets of conversations at Lucille, not out of malice, but as a precaution. She'd heard too many stories of servers being harassed or mistreated, and she'd started keeping notes and audio clips to protect herself and document her interactions with clients for Rise Tech. Dominic's words, his mocking tone, his casual dismissal of diversity in tech, it was all on that recorder. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she played back the audio. The clarity was startling. Dominic's voice, dripping with arrogance, dismissing her proposal and mocking her in front of his table. But it was more than that. Earlier in the evening, she'd overheard him talking to his colleagues about Black Tech's hiring practices, boasting about keeping certain types out of leadership roles to maintain efficiency. It was damning, and she had it all. Elena's eyes widened as she listened. Camila, this is explosive. What are you going to do with it? Camila didn't hesitate. I'm going to share it. She returned to the dining room, her resolve hardened. Dominic's table was still laughing, oblivious to the storm coming. She approached them again, her phone in hand, the recorder app open. Mr. Blackwell, she said, her voice carrying across the now hushed room. You said people like me don't know how the world works. But I think the world deserves to know how you work. Before he could respond, she hit play. The audio filled the restaurant, Dominic's voice unmistakable as it mocked her proposal and bragged about his company's exclusionary practices. Gasps rippled through the room. Diners pulled out their phones, some recording the moment, others whispering in shock. Dominic's face turned ashen, his smirk gone. Camila didn't stop there. She uploaded the audio to X, tagging Black Tech Solutions and major news outlets. Her caption was simple. This is what happens when you tell a black waitress her dreams don't matter. #RiseTech #expose the truth. Within minutes, the post was shared thousands of times. By the time Camila's shift ended, it had gone viral. The next morning, Camila woke to a flood of notifications. Her post had been retweeted by activists, journalists, and even a few celebrities. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like, "Billionaire mocks waitress's dream, she fights back," and "Tech mogul exposed for discriminatory remarks." The audio was played on morning shows, dissected on podcasts, and debated on X. Camila's name was everywhere. But it wasn't just about her. The conversation exploded into a broader reckoning about diversity in tech. People shared their own stories of exclusion, discrimination, and exploitation in the industry. Rise Tech became a rallying cry, with donations pouring in from individuals and organizations inspired by Camila's courage. Reverend Carter and Maria Lopez helped her set up a crowdfunding page, which raised $500,000 in 48 hours. Dominic, meanwhile, was in freefall. Blacktech's stock plummeted as sponsors and clients distanced themselves. An internal investigation was launched, uncovering emails and documents that corroborated Camila's recording. Lawsuits followed, filed by former employees who'd been silenced for years. Dominic issued a public apology, but it was too late, his reputation was in tatters. Camila didn't revel in his downfall. She was too busy building Rise Tech. With the funding, she hired a team, rented an office in Brooklyn, and launched the first cohort of Ments. 50 young people from underserved communities, including her brother, Marcus. The program offered coding classes, internships, and one-on-one mentorship from industry professionals who'd reached out after her story went viral. 6 months later, Camila stood on a stage at a national tech conference, her heart pounding as she faced a crowd of thousands. Rise Tech was now a multi-million-dollar initiative, with partnerships across the country. She'd also founded the Equity Alliance, a non-profit dedicated to holding corporations accountable for diversity and inclusion. Her work had sparked policy changes, with several tech giants committing to transparent hiring practices. As she prepared to speak, she thought back to that night at Lucille. The humiliation, the laughter, the weight of Dominic's words. It had nearly broken her, but it had also forged her. She wasn't just a waitress anymore, she was a force, a voice for those who'd been silenced. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady. "I'm Camila Johnson, and I believe in a world where everyone gets a seat at the table. Not because of who they know or what they look like, but because of what they can do." The crowd erupted in applause, and Camila smiled, her eyes shining with pride. She wasn't fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future, for Marcus, for her mother, for every dreamer who'd been told they didn't belong. And somewhere, in the wreckage of his empire, Dominic Blackwell was watching, his power stripped away, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. Camila's story didn't end on that stage. Rise Tech grew into a global movement, training thousands of young people and reshaping the tech industry. The Equity Alliance became a watchdog, ensuring corporations walked the talk on diversity. Camila never forgot her roots. She still visited Lucille, not as a server but as a guest, greeted warmly by Elena and her former colleagues. Her mother's health improved, and Marcus graduated with honors, landing a job at a startup that valued his talent. Camila's life wasn't perfect. She still faced challenges, skeptics, and the weight of her own ambition. But she'd learned something that night at Lucille. Her voice was her power, and no one could take that away. As she looked out at the next cohort of Rise Tech Ments, she saw herself in their eyes, hungry, determined, ready to change the world. And she knew, with every fiber of her being, that they would.